Okay, so we have the capability of a student who's currently logged in to join a particular section. So ideally, we would perhaps, from here, having enrolled, we could perhaps navigate to the profile page, right? Once we're in the profile page, we could see that indeed we see those sections or courses that we have enrolled in, right? Another thing that we would need to be able to do is, for instance, that those seats that are available should be able to, they should go down, right? So two updates would need to occur in the database, right? We would need to decrement the seats of a record that lives in a different collection, plus do the insert of this new enrollment in another collection, right? So two things need to happen, both asynchronous, right? And we should not come back to the server until we are completely sure that both of them have occurred, okay? Otherwise, for instance, we could come back here, navigate to the profile, and we don't yet see the enrollment object, right? Or we get into a race condition where, yes, the enrollment occurred, but the seats have not been updated yet, right? And somebody thinks that those seats are still available. Okay, so we need to make sure that those two things, even though they're asynchronous, they both need to occur before we come back with any confirmation that we're all set. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. So here in the enrollment enroll student in section, we are just doing what? We're just creating the enrollment record, right? We are creating the enrollment record. We also should be updating the seats in the section, right? We should be decrementing the seats in the section. Perhaps we could do that in any order. Perhaps we could first decrement the seats, right? And once we know that we've decremented the seats, now we create the enrollment, or either way. So let's do that. We could, for instance, in the section model, we could implement the capability of decrementing the seats in a section, right? If you give me the ID of that section, I'll update the seats to be one less than what it used to be there. All right, so let's do that. We could implement here a function that says function decrement section seats, right, of a particular section ID. Okay, so that would be an update, right? That would be an update that says, find me the section that has this particular ID, and I want to update a particular field. I want to decrement it. So to do that, we're going to do a return section model. Right, we're going to use an update, right? And the update takes as arguments two objects. The first object takes a filter, says which record do you want to update, okay? And you can put here a predicate, right, of ands and ors, or just a field that is equal to some value. In our particular case is that we want to update the section model whose ID, right, matches the section ID. Okay, so now we know that we are only updating that one section. Okay? And what do I want to do? I want to decrement. Right, the second argument is the modifications you want to do. Right? You can set a value to be something. You can increment a value. In this particular case, we want to increment a value. Right? And to increment in this case, it's decrement the value. To decrement, we're going to use the inc operator. The inc operator allows you to increment a field plus or minus in a particular amount. Right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to increment, and increment takes takes one argument, and the argument is the name of the field and by how much you want to increment it. Right? And so we want to increment the seats field. So seats, we want to increment it by -1. Make sense? Right? And if somebody unenrolls, we would have something similar. Right? It would look exactly the same. It would be called increment section, and this would be section ID and with a plus. plus 1. Right? So we either increment the seats or we decrement the seats. Right? We could have also added maybe an argument, decrement section seats, and it could not only take the section ID but also an argument. Yes, and that argument could have a default value of 1 or -1. Right? Say the registrars want to increment, add just 5 new seats or 10 seats to a particular section. Right? So that'd be nice if we could pass in an argument. That'd be nice, right? So let's just leave it like this. So it's very simple. It would be -1 or +1. All right, so those are implemented, and let's expose those in our API. And increment. All right, so they're exposed. We could use it. What are we going to call this? Well, we could expose it as a URL. Perhaps the registrars has a part of their UI is that they can open more seats or whatnot. But in this particular case, we just want to use it as part of our logic of somebody enrolling or unenrolling. Okay, so this is not necessarily needs to be exposed to a URL. Yes, as a service. In particular, we want to do it in the enroll student in section. Right, this is where we want to do it. So what we could do is right here. We could do section model. And we could say decrement section seats, and we're going to pass in as argument the section ID. All right, and notice that these two are now in a race condition. Okay, they're both asynchronous call to the database server. All right, there's no guarantee of which one will complete first. All right, so it could be that. Section goes off, and enrollments goes off as well, and enrollments finishes before section model, right? It enrolls the student, goes back to the client, and the client says, okay, you're enrolled, but I still see the seats haven't changed. There were 12 seats, and it still has 12 seats. Okay, so to make this synchronous, right, to make sure that this occurs in a particular sequence, right? There's a couple of ways that can be done, right? One way that it can be done, I'm sorry? Yep. Is that here we're going to have obviously the then, right? And this is going to come back and saying that this callback says, hey, I'm done, right? The sections have been decremented, the seats are done, right? This is guaranteed to be done. And what we could do is to then just embed this in here, okay? To embed it here. Now we're guaranteed that I will not update the enrollment. I will not insert into a database of this new enrollment until I know that the section seats have been updated. Make sense? All right. Now this is only two because these two are dependent on each other, right? These two models are dependent on each other. Okay, they have to. Be consistent, right? It makes no sense to have an enrollment and the seats have not changed, or vice versa. So it could be the case that we have to update not just these two collections, but multiple collections, right? Say it would be 3 or 4, right? Imagine if you had to update a whole bunch of different things, right? Especially if you're graduating, you're at the end of a semester, and the database needs to be up. There's a whole bunch of systems that need your data, right? All things need to be updated. So notice that if that's the case, then we would have to do the same thing, kind of embed each call inside of the then of the previous one. Okay, this could get really hairy, right? Really hard to read. You would have a lot of these embedded calls, right? And that's where the then syntax, right, comes to help us, right, to make it a little bit easier to read, right? Instead of having to embed these things one after another, right? What the then allows us to do is the following, right? It allows us to check this out, move this then out of here, right? Put it out here, and this returns. Right, so the return, notice the inner then returns a promise, which is then going to be handled right, by the second registration of this then. See that? Something that would have been fairly indented, yes? Something that might have been very hard to read to see who's embedded in what, right? Because of the asynchronous nature of these calls. Now it looks a little bit more like this first, then this second, then this third. It looks as if these were synchronous, right? The syntax changed a little bit, but nothing really has changed, right? It's the same exact logic, same exact notion, but that is one of the reasons that these promises were created in the first place, right? To address these asynchronous calls, right? As if with this easier to read syntax, to that so that they look more like a synchronous call syntax. Yes.
A new version of JavaScript also brought await.
Yep.
So how we can use that instead of that and promise?
There's several promises libraries. They're competing. There's a whole bunch of them. This is the default one that MongoDB uses. You can configure the promises library that you want, right? You can configure as a global variable. It says I want to use this particular promises library, but this is the default one out of the box. There's a whole bunch of them hanging around. Yeah, this is the default one out of the box. Yep. But they more or less follow the same kind of idea, right? That you register a callback that's going to be invoked at a later time. All right, let's take a look at this. Let's enroll in another section, and let's look at the sections for now. What they look like right now. So section dot find, and then it's pretty. So we have several sections. We have section 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 of, I think these are all CS5610. So let's enroll in this section, which was 11. Let's enroll in it, and hopefully it'll go down to 10. Okay. All right. So let's do that. Let's restart the server. And I believe we also have an enrollment, db enrollments.find. And right now we have that student enroll in that particular section. Let's refresh this. And let's enroll again in the same one that has 11. And let's enroll. Oh, something went wrong. Can I read property ID of? Oh, I restarted the server. I need to log in again. Sorry. Log in. Enroll. Let's clear this and enroll. Okay, went out, came back. That's the enrollments. If I go here and I take a look at these sections, notice that it used to be 11, and now it's 10. Right? It has gone down. Plus the enrollments. There's an additional enrollment in there. So notice that the same student is enrolled in the same section twice, right? So that also perhaps we might want to validate and make sure that if you're already in that section, well, I'm not going to let you enroll again, right? But that's not a requirement. But makes sense that the dependency between the two. All right. Okay, so now that we have the seats having been updated correctly and dependency on the enrollments have been inserted, let's go out and perhaps navigate to the profile of that student. That student should be able to see all the sections that they're enrolled in, right? For that particular student, right? If I log in as someone else, I should see my enrollments, right? And that's one of the requirements in the project, right? That the profile should show all data that is associated to that particular person who's logged in, right? So let's take a look at how we could do that.